Hi there. Welcome back to Reddit Confessions. Let me tell you something strange. The last conversation we had as a normal couple wasn't about cheating. It wasn't about money. It wasn't even a fight. It was about a smoke detector. She was frying something in the kitchen, salmon, I think. The battery had been low for weeks, beeping every 40 seconds. I had a new battery in my hand, a chair dragged under the ceiling mount, and I simply said, "This won't take a sec." She sighed and rolled her eyes. "You worry too much, Martin." That was it. That was the moment. Not dramatic. Not fiery. Just dismissive. Like the act of caring, even for a stupid chirping sensor, was some kind of weakness. What she didn't know was, I had already replaced that battery twice. It wasn't the detector. It was something deeper. Something eating through the drywall of our life, quiet and poisonous. I didn't tell her I'd seen the texts. I didn't tell her I'd followed the Uber receipts. I didn't even tell her I'd watched her, from our own car, step into someone else's apartment at 11:53 p.m. while texting me. Still at dinner with Rachel. Don't wait up. You ever sit in your car in the dark, motor off, hands on the wheel, while your whole life happens across the street, without you? I did. And not just once. She was always so confident I wouldn't go looking. That I was too soft. That I'd worry, then apologize for worrying. But here's what she didn't expect. The apartment she kept sneaking off to? I rented the one directly above it. 3 days before she ever even lied to me about Rachel's new place. You see, worrying, it's not weakness. It's noticing. And I had noticed everything. So while she laughed in someone else's sheets, I took notes. I took photos. I logged times. I collected details, receipts, lies, voice notes. I didn't interrupt. I didn't confront. I documented. And when the time came, I didn't explode. I simply handed her a box. Inside, a printed timeline, copies of her hotel bookings, screenshots of her texts, my wedding ring, and a note. You said I worry too much. Maybe. But now, you'll have to worry on your own. She didn't cry. Not right away. She laughed. Said, "This is insane. You've been spying on me." I shrugged. No, I've been preparing. Because when everything matters to you, every second, every lie, every alarm that doesn't go off, you don't just walk away. You make sure they remember it. That was day one of her new life. Without me. Without safety nets. Without someone who worried too much. But that's just the beginning. The morning after I handed her the box, the house was quieter than it had ever been. Not the peaceful kind of quiet. The kind you hear just before a siren cuts the air. She sat on the edge of our bed like a guest in her own life, staring at the evidence. Her phone lay next to her, the screen blank, but I knew what she was thinking. Who else knows? She didn't ask me to stay. She didn't beg. That's not who Lacey is. She's the type who's always been able to talk her way out of a parking ticket, an awkward dinner, a second chance. She thought she could control the story, maybe spin it in her favor before it reached anyone else. But for the first time, she was playing catch-up. I was already out the door before she opened her mouth. I didn't slam it behind me. I didn't look back. I just walked away, calmly, like I was going to the store. In reality, I was headed to a meeting. Not with a lawyer, not with a therapist. With the realtor who'd helped us stage all those perfect homes she loved to show off. The irony? He was the same man she was sleeping with. I knew his name before she did. Chadwick Dorsey. Yeah, not even kidding. A man named Chadwick. He wore turtlenecks in spring. Called my wife, Lace, in texts he didn't bother deleting. I had pictures, receipts, even a voice memo of her calling me emotionally exhausting while giggling over sangria. He wasn't at the office that morning, probably with her, trying to build a new narrative. But his assistant was. A woman named Jenna, mid-50s, too sharp for small talk. I handed her a sealed envelope and said, "Make sure Chad sees this. No need to open it yourself." Inside were 3 things. A printed transcript of their texts from the last 4 months. A still image from a hidden camera in the penthouse Lacey swore she was only working in. And a note from me that read, "She lies to everyone eventually. Even you. Good luck." I didn't expect him to respond, but I knew he'd get the message. His assistant nodded slowly as I walked out, her eyes darting between me and the envelope like she already knew whatever was inside would ruin someone's week. By the time I got home, Lacey was gone. So was her laptop, a suitcase, and a single photograph from the hallway wall. The one of us in Montreal, the trip she once said healed her soul. The same trip where I found out later she was texting him from the hotel bathroom while I was downstairs ordering wine. She left a sticky note on the fridge. I almost laughed at the smallness of it. We both made mistakes. I need time to think. Time to think. She'd had months. I'd had sleepless nights and a gut full of acid. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even sad. I was just clean. That's the only word I can use. Like finally peeling off a soaked coat after standing in the rain too long. That night, I moved her things into the guest room. Not to be petty, just to reclaim space. Physical, emotional, mental, all of it. The bed, the closet, the silence, they were mine again. But the thing is, I had no idea just how far she was willing to go to keep control, or how quickly her facade would crack under pressure. I thought leaving was the climax. I was wrong. 3 days went by without a word from Lacey. No texts, no calls, not even one of those fake check-ins she used to send when she was working late. Just silence. And you'd think that would feel good, peaceful even, but it didn't. It felt like the part in the horror movie where everything seems fine, but you know something is hiding in the dark just off-screen. I kept working, ate takeout, folded laundry that didn't belong to her anymore. And I waited because I knew she wasn't done. On the 4th day, it happened. I was walking out of the local coffee shop with my usual, a triple shot Americano and too many napkins, when someone called my name from across the parking lot. I turned and saw Jenny. Not Jenna from Chadwick's office. No, this was Jenny with an E, Lacey's younger cousin. The one who got kicked out of college twice and still somehow thought she was more mature than everyone. She stormed toward me in yoga pants, sunglasses too big for her face, and rage radiating off her like static. "What the hell did you do to her, Martin?" she snapped, holding up her phone like it was a badge. "She's at my place crying her eyes out. You embarrassed her. You stalked her." I blinked. "Did she show you the photos?" "What photos?" That's when I knew Lacey hadn't told her the truth. Of course she hadn't. She was building her version, one crafted carefully to keep herself the victim and me the overthinking, obsessive freak who just couldn't let go. "She told me you broke into her work staging and installed a camera," Jenny went on. "That's illegal, Martin." "I owned the apartment," I said calmly. "The listing was in my name. I rented it weeks before. Want to see the lease?" She faltered for half a second. I saw it in her shoulders, but then she doubled down. "Why are you doing this?" She made a mistake. Everyone does. It was that word, mistake, that did something to me. She called months of deceit a mistake. She called demeaning me in texts, mocking my kindness, lying to my face, a mistake. I didn't raise my voice. I just said one thing before walking past her. Mistakes don't require hotel bookings. They don't require burner phones either. You might want to ask her about the second one. The one she keeps in the zipper pocket of her brown purse. Jenny froze, and I didn't look back. That night, Lacey broke the silence. She showed up at the house. Not to apologize, of course not. She came for damage control. She tried to enter like nothing had happened, reaching for the wine glasses from the top shelf like she still lived there. "You can't just humiliate me and expect there not to be consequences," she said, not looking at me. "You blindsided Chad. He called off the partnership. I could lose that entire client line." "You mean the man who called me milquetoast Martin while still wearing my cologne?" She turned, angry now. "You hacked my phone." "No. You left your iPad synced, remember? I guess that's what happens when you use my Apple ID to download wedding photos you never even printed." She sat down then, not because she was tired, but because she finally realized I hadn't just been worrying. I had known. Every step, every detail. And I had stayed quiet long enough for her to build her little kingdom of lies, then walked in and gently pulled the rug out from under it. "You could have just left," she said. "You didn't have to blow everything up." "I did leave," I said, "but you didn't stop. You wanted to be the victim. So I made sure the story had more than one version." And that's when it hit her. She'd lost control of the narrative. She couldn't go back to friends and say I was cold or distant or neurotic. Not when the evidence told another story. Not when screenshots could scream louder than tears. She left again. No suitcase this time. Just silence. But the silence didn't last. Because 2 days later, I got an email, not from her, but from someone who had every reason to stay far away from this entire mess. And what he told me changed everything I thought I knew about how deep this really went. The email didn't have a subject line. Just a single sentence in the preview. "You don't know me, but I know about you." Now, I get spam like everyone else. I've accidentally clicked one of those "your package is delayed" texts more times than I care to admit. But this wasn't that. It came to my personal inbox, not my work one, and the sender's name was just a single initial, K. Against my better judgment, I opened it. Inside was a short paragraph. Direct. Precise. No threats. No insults. Just a warning. Martin, I've been where you are. I thought she'd changed too. I saw the sweet, messy-haired girl with the big ideas and charm that could melt steel. But Lacey's not who she pretends to be, and she's done this before. I have proof. I thought I was crazy until I saw what she did to you. I can show you everything. K. My heart stopped. Not because I was surprised, but because I wasn't. Deep down, I'd always had this itch, this sense that what I caught her doing wasn't the first time, just the most recent. But part of me, the still pathetic, still hopeful part, had wanted to believe I was the exception, that she had slipped, that her betrayal was a moment of weakness, not a pattern. Apparently, I was wrong. I replied, cautiously, asked who he was, how he knew her, how he found me. And within an hour, I had his full name, Keaton Meyer, a 41-year-old real estate consultant from Denver. And 4 years ago, Lacey lived there. Before we met, before she ever told me her fresh start had nothing to do with burning bridges behind her. Keaton sent files, screenshots, voicemails, a timeline that overlapped mine with uncanny similarity. The late-night texts, the gaslighting, the staged emotional breakdowns that made him question himself. And at the center of it all, Lacey, always claiming she just needed space, while carving out time for someone else. He'd even saved one of her voicemails from the day she left him, the one where she said, "You'll never understand how exhausting it is to be with someone who constantly worries." Sound familiar? But that wasn't the worst part. Not by a long shot. Keaton wasn't the only one. He'd compiled a folder with 2 other men who had reached out to him over the years, one of them still legally married when he met Lacey. They had all lived in different states. All believed they were the first. All thought they were just unlucky. Turns out, Lacey had a routine. Charm. Distance. Infidelity. Victimhood. Vanish. Repeat. She didn't burn bridges. She evaporated them. Made sure there was nothing left to return to. I stared at the screen until my eyes blurred. My body felt numb, but my mind was sprinting. Not out of rage, but realization. I had spent so many nights blaming myself, wondering if I'd hovered too much, questioned too often, wanted reassurance too badly. But now I saw the truth. It was never about me. She was never standing on solid ground to begin with. But here's the twist, the part that nearly made me drop my coffee. Keaton didn't come to me just to vent. He wasn't warning me just for closure. He was reaching out because Lacey had reached out to him again. 2 weeks before she left, she'd messaged him. "Hey, I know it's been a long time. I'm in town next month. Would be nice to catch up." No context. No apology. Just a breadcrumb tossed in the dirt, expecting someone to crawl after it. She had a backup plan. A contingency. Just in case things didn't work out with Chadwick or whatever other man was waiting in line. And if I hadn't exposed her, I have no doubt she would have walked into Keaton's life again like she'd never raised it to the ground. This wasn't heartbreak. This was a pattern. I sat in my living room that night, lights off, just the blue glow of the monitor lighting the room, and I realized I had 2 choices. I could walk away with my dignity, knowing I was finally free. Or I could make sure she never got to play this game again. But I wasn't thinking about revenge. I was thinking about prevention. I was thinking about the next guy, the next worrier, the next version of me. So I made a call to someone I hoped I'd never speak to again. The last person Lacey ever wanted in the same room as me. Her sister. And what she told me next. That flipped everything upside down. Calling Kendra was like lighting a fuse I couldn't snuff out. She and Lacey weren't just sisters. They were born less than a year apart, practically raised like twins. Same taste in clothes, music, even the same laugh, which used to mess with my head when they were both in the room. But Kendra had always been more grounded. Less sugar, more salt. If Lacey was charm and fireworks, Kendra was granite, blunt, cold when she wanted to be, but honest in a way that made people squirm. When she answered the phone and heard it was me, there was this pause. Not hesitation, calculation. Like she was trying to decide which version of herself to use. "It's about Lacey," I said. "I figured," she replied flatly. "You're 4 years late." That stopped me cold. "What do you mean by that?" She sighed. like she'd been dragging this weight for years and was finally done carrying it. I warned you. You just didn't know it was a warning. And that's when I remembered. The wedding day. The card she handed me at the rehearsal dinner. The one I thought was just a sisterly joke. It said, "Good luck. You're gonna need it." I thought it was sarcasm. I thought she was teasing Lacey for being hard to live with. But no, that was her way of telling me I was walking into a fire with my eyes wide shut. She does this, Martin, Kendra said. She burns people down. She's like a storm that promises to pass, but never does. You think it's over, but then she finds a new coast to ruin. My throat tightened. And you never said anything? I did. In my own way. You think she keeps people close? She only lets you see what works for her. The rest, the mess, the damage, that's hidden behind charm and tearful speeches. You were just the next guy who thought you could fix her. I didn't know whether to thank her or scream. So I asked the only question that mattered. Did you know about Chadwick? Her pause lasted just a little too long. I suspected, she finally said. She started disappearing more. Bought clothes she didn't wear at home. I found a receipt once, a hotel in Santa Monica, under his name. She said it was for a client breakfast. Who has a client breakfast at midnight? You didn't tell me. She would have cut me off. And I wasn't ready to lose her again. We went 2 years without speaking after Denver. I tried to help then, too. Denver. That again. So I asked her directly. Did something happen there? With Keaton? And Kendra laughed. Not out of humor. Out of disbelief that I still didn't know the full picture. She didn't tell you, she said. Of course not. She left him the same way she left the others. But what she never mentioned was what happened before that. Now my skin was crawling. Lacey got caught, Martin. Keaton's sister. She worked at the same firm. She saw them together at a conference, handsy and smug. Told Keaton everything. Lacey played dumb, then cried, then ghosted. Disappeared. Changed cities. Swore she was starting fresh. Fresh. That's what she told me too. And Kendra didn't stop there. She did the same to someone before Keaton. His name was Ezra. Software engineer from Portland. Quiet. Sweet. Completely unraveled when she left. You want to know how I know? Because I dated him after her. And he was still trying to figure out what he did wrong. He thought it was his fault that she cheated. Said he wasn't fun enough, exciting enough. Just like me. Everything Kendra told me didn't just fill in the blanks. It rewrote the entire narrative I'd believed for years. Lacey wasn't a woman who slipped. She was a woman who studied the fall. She knew how to make people trust her, how to collect their strengths and slowly turn them into flaws. She could weaponize love, twist it into something brittle, then act surprised when it broke. By the time I hung up the phone, I was shaking. Not with anger, with understanding. Everything clicked. Every late night. Every lie disguised as laughter. Every "you worry too much." It wasn't an insult. It was a deflection. A way to make me question myself, so she never had to answer for anything. But that wasn't the part that broke me. It was what Kendra said as we ended the call. She's not done, Martin. She never is. If she came back, it's not because she loves you. It's because the next branch she tried to swing to wasn't there. You were just the nearest safe landing. That night, I didn't sleep. I laid on the couch, watching the ceiling fan spin like a broken clock. And sometime around 3 a.m., I realized I had one last thing to do, not to punish Lacey, but to protect whatever scraps of self-respect I had left. The next morning, I printed everything. The photos, the emails, the timeline. I sealed them in a thick manila envelope, and I dropped it off at her workplace, with a post-it that said, "In case anyone else is wondering who you really are." I thought it would end there. But then she came back, not to apologize, but to beg. And that is when the game changed forever. She showed up just after noon, wearing the same expression I'd seen her use to sell herself to strangers, that carefully constructed look of calm panic, equal parts vulnerability and precision. She stood at the edge of the driveway in a pressed blouse, loose hair, no makeup, holding a paper coffee cup she didn't sip from. She waited like a kid who forgot their lines in a school play, unsure if the curtain would open again. I saw her through the window, already halfway through a sandwich, and considered not going out at all. But part of me wanted to know what version of reality she was about to try selling me. So I opened the door. I didn't invite her in. "Martin," she began, her voice cracking. "Can we talk?" I stayed silent. Not out of power, but because I didn't trust myself to speak yet. She stepped forward like she still had permission. I know what I did was wrong. I wasn't thinking clearly. Things were getting hard between us, and I didn't know how to say I was drowning. You weren't drowning, I said. You were bored. That hit her. She blinked and glanced down, the act cracking for just a second. You made me feel like I didn't matter, she whispered. I almost laughed. And Chadwick made you feel seen? She didn't answer that. Instead, she pivoted. I read the email, she said. The one you sent to my office. I nodded. I figured you would. Did your boss read it too? She nodded once, slowly. I was asked to take a leave. Indefinite. There it was. The one thing she'd never been prepared to lose. Her reputation. Lacey never cared much for marriage, intimacy, or emotional repair. But her image? That was sacred. I just wanted a conversation, she said, her voice rising like she was about to cry. Not a demolition. You had years for conversation. You had nights, dinners, birthdays, airport pickups. All of that was time you spent lying. And now that the lights are on, you're upset people can see the mess? I was scared. No, I said, stepping toward her now. You were smart. You were strategic. You don't get to act like a victim because your plan didn't work. Then came the moment I wasn't prepared for. She dropped the cup, stepped forward, and actually said the words I never thought she'd say. Take me back. Silence. You know me, she continued. You know I lose control sometimes. But I always come back. You're the only person who really saw me. That last line stung. Because it used to be true. I did see her. Not the persona. Not the dressed-up version. I saw the sleepless nights, the morning anxiety, the ambition, the insecurity. I held space for all of it, and she weaponized it. Lacey, I said, I don't love who you are. I love who I thought you were. She winced. Not visibly, but I saw her jaw tighten, the way it always did when the performance wasn't landing. I continued, my voice calm, not shaking. You can't come back to a place you destroyed. There's nothing here for you now. You already packed the matches. I thought that would end it. But then she smiled, just for a second. The mask slipped, and the real Lacey peeked through. That version didn't cry. She didn't beg. She calculated. So you're really going to pretend you're better than me? She said, voice suddenly sharper. You? The man who tracked my location, who took photos of me through windows. You think anyone's going to believe you're the good guy? I stepped back, chilled. There it was, her final card. If she couldn't win as the victim, she'd flip the narrative. Make me the stalker. The bitter ex. The obsessive husband who couldn't let go. I didn't take photos through windows, I said. I took them from a property I legally rented. I didn't track your location. Your Uber receipts were on our shared account. Your iPad was synced to my cloud. And your coworkers already know the rest. She didn't say anything. Because she couldn't. She'd burned every last excuse and stood in the ash expecting a rebuild. I looked at her one final time. You said I worry too much. But you underestimated what a worried man can become when you give him a reason. And I walked back inside. She stayed on the porch another 5 minutes. I watched from the hallway as she paced, checked her phone, considered knocking again. Then she got in her car and drove away. But this isn't where it ends. Because a week later, I got a letter, not from her, but from her lawyer. She was trying to take half of everything. Yes, everything. And that's when I realized Lacey never wanted love. She wanted security. And when that failed, she wanted leverage. But she made one final mistake. She underestimated how much I'd been preparing. The envelope was thick, too thick for just paperwork. It arrived by courier, hand-delivered to my front step as if it were something noble, something worthy of my attention. The return address was from a law firm I didn't recognize, but the embossed name of hers in the corner made everything inside clear. She was coming after me. I opened it slowly, not out of fear, but because I needed the moment to settle in. I had expected petty texts, maybe an ugly social post, or even an attempt to spin a fake victim story among our mutual friends. But I hadn't expected this. Not a formal request for a fair division of marital assets, especially not worded like I was the one who'd done the damage. There it was in black and white. Lacey was demanding 50% of everything. The house, the savings account, even a portion of my pension plan, the one I'd started long before I ever met her. Her lawyer's tone was as slick as her perfume, stating that her emotional labor and non-monetary contributions entitled her to equal compensation. And the gall of it? She wanted the cat too. Oliver wasn't even hers. He was my rescue. She didn't like cats. She used to call him the silent judger. Now, suddenly, He was a vital source of emotional support during the marriage. I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I called my attorney, Mr. Lionel Hart. A slow-talking, semi-retired legal brick wall with a memory like a vault and zero patience for theatrics. I'd hired him after the Keaton email. Not because I was planning anything aggressive, but because deep down, I knew Lacey wasn't done playing. When I dropped the documents on Lionel's desk, he flipped through them like he was browsing a boring menu. Then he looked up with the most dangerously calm face I'd ever seen. "She's trying to beat you to the punch," he said. "She's hoping you'll settle quick to avoid drama. That we won't take this public. But we're not settling. You've got leverage. A lot more than she thinks." And he was right. Because while Lacey was busy preparing courtroom dramatics, I'd been preparing evidence. Dozens of emails, screenshots, audio messages. More importantly, I had proof of her secondary bank account, the one she used to move over $12,000 out of our joint funds into an account under a maiden alias. She thought I didn't notice the withdrawals. She thought I never checked the statements. She was wrong. And then came the hearing. I walked in wearing a suit I hadn't worn since a wedding 3 years ago. She walked in like she was accepting an award. Flawless hair, subtle makeup, clutching tissues before a single word had been said. Her lawyer spoke first, painting her as the emotionally displaced spouse. A woman who had tried everything to preserve a fading marriage while I, the obsessive and privacy-violating husband, had driven her to seek distance. They had copies of emails, cherry-picked, of course. They framed my evidence gathering as calculated surveillance. They brought up the Stage Department. They even suggested I had planted the camera. But Lionel, he didn't flinch. He waited until they were done painting me into a corner, then pulled out our file. Calmly, methodically, like slicing a cake. He presented the Uber receipts, the sync device logs, the notarized lease agreement for the apartment. He showed how every bit of information I had obtained was through legally shared property or public records. But the masterstroke, the thing that broke her mask, was the bank record. "Your Honor," Lionel said, holding up the statement. "This is a transfer made to an account under the name L. Arden. That's Ms. Lacey Arden's legal maiden name. She opened this account during the marriage. She did not disclose it. We have 6 months of deposits matching charges from her travel and lodging. And we have text messages referencing this account, including one that reads, and I quote, 'He won't find this one.'" You could feel the room shift. Like oxygen had left the building. Lacey's face changed. She went from calculated to cornered in seconds. And for the first time since this began, I saw fear. Not sadness. Not regret. Fear. The judge didn't smile. He didn't raise his voice. He simply paused and looked at her. "Ms. Arden," he said, "this court does not take kindly to financial deception. You'll be lucky if we don't pursue sanctions." Her lawyer looked like he wanted to sink into the floor. The final decision wasn't instant. These things never are. But the tone was set. The court wasn't buying her show. And suddenly, the woman who tried to gut me in silence had handed me the microphone. Outside the courtroom, she didn't speak to me. She walked past without a word, without a glance. No more fake tears. No more notes on the fridge. No more manipulation. Just her high heels clicking against the tile as she exited into the cold, gray parking lot, alone. But even then, I knew Lacey wouldn't disappear quietly. People like her don't. And sure enough, just when I thought I had finally closed the chapter, I got one more message. Not from her. From someone else entirely. Someone who should have had nothing to do with any of this. The message came 2 weeks after the court hearing. No subject line. Just a name in the sender box I didn't recognize, Callie Mason. I hovered over it, debating whether to open it at all. I was tired of twists. I wanted quiet, finally. But curiosity won. It always did. Inside the message was a paragraph. Short. Measured. Kind. "Hi, Martin. You don't know me, but I worked with Lacey years ago, before she moved cities. I saw your name during the hearing. I was a paralegal present in the room. I didn't want to cross a line, but I felt I had to reach out. I wanted to tell you, you weren't crazy. A lot of people saw what was happening back then, but didn't speak up. What you did took guts. Quiet, steady, unglamorous guts. And I just thought someone should say that to you. I hope you're finding peace. You deserve it. Callie." I reread it 3 times. It wasn't long. It wasn't poetic. But something about it cracked open the final bit of tension still curled around my ribs. For so long, I'd wondered if I was imagining it all. The slow unraveling. The lies hidden behind smiles. The way I'd been made to feel small for simply caring too much. But here was a stranger, someone who'd seen a piece of the story from afar, telling me I hadn't imagined it, that I hadn't overreacted, that I'd simply been up against someone who was used to getting away with everything, until I didn't let her. After that, I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I breathed, really breathed. I started running again. Not from anything, just because it felt good. I made my own coffee in the mornings without wondering when she'd come down and sigh that I'd made it too strong. I adopted another rescue cat, a scrappy little orange tabby named Junebug who slept on my chest like she was guarding my heart. I even started writing again. Not Reddit posts. Real writing. Messy short stories that had no direction but gave me something to shape. Something I could build without fearing someone else would tear it down. One afternoon, I passed by our old favorite cafe. I almost didn't stop, but I went in, ordered my drink, and sat down in the same spot we used to share. And it hit me. I wasn't sad. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't angry anymore. I was free. And that freedom didn't come from revenge or court victories or emails from strangers. It came from knowing I had never been weak for worrying. I had only been wrong for thinking someone like her would value that worry. Lacey tried to rewrite the story so many times. But in the end, I wrote the final chapter. Quietly, steadily, honestly. And that's where it ends. Not in flames. Not in chaos. Just peace. Thanks for listening to my story. And now I want to hear from you. Have you ever ignored a red flag that came back to haunt you? Or stood up quietly when someone expected you to fall apart? Share your moment in the comments. I read every one. And don't forget to subscribe for more real, raw stories like this one, right here on Reddit Confessions.